Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donohue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy.
Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donohue, and my usual cohort in creepitude is the amazing Sonia Mansfield, and she usually says, "Hello, my friend." But right now, as we speak, she is in Ireland, going to Galway, having the time of her life. But that's okay. We do have a special guest this week, and it's my friend Alicia from the Trashy Divorces podcast. Hello, Alicia.
Hello, my friend.
My friend, we are friends in real life, and it's very exciting for me to have you on the show. Let me just do the usual rigmarole, and then we will get into what we're talking about today. We are a podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We'll talk a little bit about Trashy Divorces, and then we'll talk about Truman Capote. But just wanted to let you all know, we do have a basic Facebook page, but that's a place where people go to complain about our language. I don't know how much Alicia likes to swear, but I know I like to swear a lot. So if you have children in the car or whatever, if that's a problem, listen to another show. Don't complain about it in the Facebook page. But if you do want to interact with us, we are very interactive in our Facebook group. You just type in What a Creep podcast group, ask to join, and you just come on in. We're on Twitter at CreepPod, as long as that exists, because somebody had What a Creep on Twitter for over 10 years and never used it. We're on What a Creep Instagram, Threads, and we have an old-timey email, whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. If you would like some stickers, send us an email with your address, and we will drop them off to you anywhere on the planet of Earth. Alrighty, we are going to just jump right into our show today because Mercury's in retrograde. It took us about 10, 15 minutes to get this going. More than that, to make this happen today. So, Alicia, welcome to the show, and tell everyone, please, about Trashy Divorces.
Holy cats. I am delighted to be here. I will do my very best to represent the other half today for Miss Sonia having the time of her life on her big vacay. I am Alicia. I am one half of a good podcast about bad relationships called Trashy Divorces. I am another half of another podcast about naughty nobles, all of our betters behaving badly. That podcast is Trashy Royals. I am also the solo host of my little niche podcast called Done and Done, about Dominic Dunn and his writings, which is how you and I stumbled onto this idea of Truman Capote.
Yeah, we're both Dunn geeks. We both really love Dominic Dunn. I mean, let me set this up, y'all. Alicia knows her stuff, and she really has read everything that's available out there. She's a wonderful resource, so this should be super fun. But I kind of wanted to start the show a little more up to the, the little news breaks that we're having in celebrities. It seems like with all the planets in retrograde, everybody's breaking up. That's what I'm finding out in the last 4 or 5 weeks. I feel like a lot of breakups have happened, and I wanted to talk about a couple of celebrity breakups with you today, if you're cool with that.
Absolutely. That is my Trashy Divorces ballywick. Even though we cover historical, we do cover current, and it has been, yikes, the summer of breakups. Probably the most current happening right now is Joe Jonas and Sophie Turner, the very latest. And this is as of an hour ago that I saw that Joe Jonas is reporting, camps, friends of Joe, are reporting that it was something that Sophie said caught on their Ring camera that told Joe it was over.
Was she walking into the house and just said something out loud and he saw it? Or did she leave? Do you not know?
Unclear what was said, but it has been sort of an interesting week. They sold their house a while ago. I think this has been in the works for a while. Mm-hmm. If we remember, Joe Jonas is the guy who broke up with Taylor Swift over the 25-second phone call. Also messed up that Gigi Hadid thing. So, Joe Jonas marries a younger Sophie. They have twins. I'm finding it kind of creepy, since we're on the topic, that the headlines over the last few days have been like, Sophie Turner's a bad mom. She likes to party and Joe just likes to stay home. There's a little bit of unfairness about that, but that's one I've definitely got my eye on.
I understand that he's on the road and the kids are with him. And I'm not sure if they're twins. I think they're two different ages, but they're very young.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of them's only like a year old and the other one's just a little older than that. And what is she, 25? She's pretty young.
Probably, yeah, 26 by, I mean, a little bit older by now.
But that's still pretty young to take on that much responsibility. And I've had friends that got married very young, like right out of college or even before college. And some of them turned out great and some of them don't turn out great. A lot of marriages don't turn out great. And especially in, I know in show business, it's a lot of pressure. Also, I heard that she likes to be in England and wants to stay there.
Well, and that wouldn't be the first time within our Trashy Divorces universe we've seen couples who prefer to be on different sides of the world.
Right.
That sometimes keeps a relationship together, depending on how much time you like to spend together. Sometimes it's the thing that's going to drive you apart. And who knows? I got my eye on that one.
Well, supposedly he has the kids with him on the road, and people are now mom shaming her for not doing that. And it's like, they are his kids too. And I'm sure he has a pack of nannies to take care of all the things that the kids need taken care of. And if he's going to be a dad that goes on the road a lot, maybe he just wants his kids to get used to that, because that's going to be the lifestyle.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Another one that I have my eye on. Did you catch up on Corey Feldman splitting from his third wife?
No. Oh my God. What happened?
We covered this one not too long ago. They separated. She's part of his Corey's Angels band thing. Apparently, this poor woman is suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And Corey just can't handle it. So they've set out a amicable separation notice. I think this is his third time down. There's another hot one going on this summer. Steve Harvey with his wife that was finally going to last, Marjorie, I think. They have filed for divorce.
That is shocking to me, because that, like you said, that was the one that was going to last. And he's actually, for my other show, Book versus Movie, we did a segment about a Steve Harvey book, and it was a relationship book. And it was all about women don't give up the cookie until you get a ring and all that old school sexist crap, which actually turned into a decent movie that I can't remember right now. But I was shocked because, like you said, it was like his fourth or fifth marriage. And I thought he was really settled. She's going to get a lot of money. He's worth some coin.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about Trashy Divorces as a podcast is there is never a lack of material.
Well, today we wanted to talk about Truman Capote, and it's something that actually Sonia and I have been talking about, like maybe adding on with the show, having on a segment that's like, well, are they a creep or not? And sometimes, it's a little like 3 of one, have a dozen of the other. But I wanted to talk a bit about Truman Capote because I'm very passionate I'm a big fan of his work. I've read everything. I used to work at Condé Nast, and they had all the old New Yorkers in the library, and I would go down and read, his old short stories and things like that. I'm a big fan. I think he's a very interesting person. I just find him very interesting. And he was born, let me just make it real quick. So he was born in New Orleans, 1924. I never remember this. When I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, he did all the talk shows. He did the talk show circuit and was usually rather toasted when he was on them. He liked to drink. He was a big drinker. He had a very chaotic upbringing. His mother remarries and takes him to New York from the South. And the South is, by the way, where he met his friend Harper Lee. They were lifelong friends until their friendship fractured. And we'll talk about that when we're talking about the Clutter case today. But he died in 1984 at the age of 59 from the alcohol abuse. And we wanted to talk about, he'd written short stories. He was a bon vivant. Do you want to talk about the white parties that he had?
Oh, goodness. There's so much to talk about with Truman. I am fascinated by him and within the Done and Done podcast, because there really is a very tender moment that transpires between Truman Capote and Dominic Dunn later in their lives that is very non-creep, that launched goodness, me and the year and a half journey I have taken into Truman and his life and his writings, and sometimes his very simple and sometimes very complex relationships.
Mm-hmm.
There's goodness. I think a little bit, if I may,
Yes, please.
unpack his childhood just a little bit more. Truman was born in New Orleans to a mother who couldn't wait to get out of town. Lily Mae Falk's history is really sort of interesting. She's a teenager who meets the traveling salesman, immediately gets pregnant. People plead with Lily Mae to abort the child. She won't. She'll marry Truman's father, and they sort of hit the road. Truman doesn't hang out much with Lily Mae for a while. Lily Mae can't wait to get out of Monroeville, Alabama. Truman is raised by his great aunts. There's one especially close to him, Aunt Sook. And that is where Truman gets at least some part of tenderness and recognition for the, I think, special talent he is. Aunt Sook and Aunt Jenny live next door to the Lee family, Nell Harper Lee, whose father, right, in fiction is Atticus Finch.
Mm-hmm.
Nell Harper Lee's father for real in Monroeville is an attorney. He's also the publisher of the newspaper. And he will give, Mr. Lee will give Truman and Nell a typewriter at the age of 6. Truman also is always writing. He's always observant. He's always writing. And he, within childhood, is very doted upon by his aunts. But mostly the connection with he and Lily Mae is Lily Mae comes to visit Truman, stays about 24 hours, and then she hightails it out again. Have you covered, I'm certain you have, Breakfast at Tiffany's?
Oh, yes. We covered that on Book versus Movie. And yes, it's the book is very, very different from the movie that we were all famous, the Audrey Hepburn film.
Very different. But if you think about Holly Golightly in her first sort of incarnation as Lula Mae, that is very much Truman's mother, Lily Mae. Lily Mae hightails it to New York in order to find a husband, in order to get out of her small, tiny town, Alabama, leaving her son behind. So when Lily Mae, who becomes Nina, finally does land Joe Capote, Truman is jacked, right? At 9 from everything he's ever known. Now he's in a private school. He spent some time in New York. There is some time in Connecticut. He makes 2 really non-creep friendships here. The first is with Carol Marcus. The second is with Phoebe Pierce. There is a connection that Truman gets here with the feminine that is not his mother. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got it in Nell Harper Lee, you have it in Phoebe Pierce, you have it in Carol Marcus. These are his most early friendships. This is going to influence, I think, how Truman relates to the feminine through the years, and most especially when we get around to the Swans.
Right.
I can talk about Truman so long. Tell me about where you want to follow that up.
I want to take that. I want to take it that living in New York and then going to school in Connecticut was very advantageous for him. He got a great education. He also met wonderful people. He got to work at the New Yorker at the ad desk or whatever. He got his foot in the door and he was always just a writer after that. He was writing short stories. He was known for being a bon vivant, as I said. He loved to party. He loved to have cocktail parties. He was an extrovert to the extreme. He also did have a very long-term relationship in his life, but he also had addictions and he had issues with, I mean, it's not creepy, but there's a bitchiness to him. There's this idea of like information as currency and what he knows about people and what he can pass along to other people to help him rise in society. It's also making conversation for him. By the time he's in the 50s, he's sort of like, what am I going to do next? What's my next great idea? I need to make more money so I could keep up this lifestyle. And so in November of 1959, just before Thanksgiving, there was a murder in Kansas, and it's the Holcomb, Kansas, and it's the Clutter family, and the entire family that was home at the time. They have son and a daughter, a man and a wife, a son and a daughter, the Clutter family, and then they had 2 older daughters that were coming home to visit for Thanksgiving. And they were murdered in their house. Somebody came into the house, stabbed the father, shot everybody, tied up the daughters, and people could not figure out why. This is a very small town. There was no money to really take there. And it was an article in the New York Times because it was so unusual. But he saw it and it just lit up his mind. So he's somebody that's like, for a lot of people, he's like an East Coast person. He's a party guy. And he's actually from small towns, and he understands how they work. And so he just gets it in this idea in his head, like, I'm going to visit this town and I'm going to see what kind of psychic damage was done with what happened here. And he brings along his friend Nell, who's Harper Lee. We should also say there are 2 Truman Capote movies, and there's 2 different In Cold Blood movies that come out. This is going to be the juggernaut in his career, but it's also going to be the thing that haunts him for the rest of his life. He goes to town. He becomes friends with the KBI, Kansas Bureau of Investigations. He becomes friendly with the town's police officers, with the ladies who lunch there, and with Nell's help, by the way, because he was a little intimidating to people. She was much more down to earth. And they helped get to know these people. They were there when the 2 killers were caught, and they were there when there was the trial. And then for Truman, he really felt it was important he had to be there for the whole thing. And that meant he needed to get to know the killers because, unfortunately, when you're murdered, the victims get forgotten, and the killers are the ones that get the headlines. And to the point that Truman was writing his stories, it would eventually be adapted into New Yorker magazine. And it was a series of publications of him bringing out the story. They had Richard Avedon take pictures of these men that killed these people. And they were losers. They were unrepentant. They were creeps, and they took away this family, this beautiful family, and haunted this town forever. I thought it was very interesting. The 2 other daughters that they had, one was married and the other one was about to get married, and she was going to get married between Christmas and New Year. But because the killers were out there and they had no idea where they were, and they thought maybe there's a mark on the family, the daughter decided to move her wedding up and got married just a couple of days after they buried their family because she wanted to be able to change her name. She's still married to that man to this day. But Truman becomes we have Bill Hickok and Perry Smith are the 2 killers. And then, of course, we learn their stories and their backstories, and they both have traumas, of course, and tough backgrounds, tough childhood. Both of them had head injuries and had traumatic things happen to them. Of course, we all know none of this is an excuse to hurt people, to harm people. But what did happen in the process is, did Truman fall in love with Perry Smith? Was he just smitten with him? Did he just fall under his spell for a bit? Who knows? But he tends to give the killers the more interesting edit. And the Clutter family for years, and I'm not mentioning too many names because they actually prefer not to. That's why I'm trying to keep the details sort of foggy. There's a documentary series called Cold Blooded, and it's streaming on Amazon, and you can see this for yourselves and witness all this. The family, when Truman turns in his book in Cold Blood, which took several years, it was well into the 60s that it came out, the family had like 30 pages of notes. I would say he gave the asshole edit to the family. He made them look like they were hicks, that they were these zealots, that they were very rigid, that there wasn't a lot of warmth in that family, that the mother was very cold and always in bed. She kept to her bed sort of thing, when in fact, she did have depression, but she was someone, good for her, went to get help when she was going through that. There's just, the edit for the family has never been justified to me compared to what the edit was for the people he met. But they were the more interesting ones to him. And that's the angle that they take with the movies that come out later. It's, for me, and he made a lot of money with In Cold Blood. This is back when, books could sell millions of copies in a year. He became a hero on the talk show circuit. But in the town where he went, Holcomb, Kansas, it's very much like 50-50 at the time. 50% of the people were excited. They were happy to get the murder solved. They liked being a part of this big story. But the other half was like, this was gruesome. He was picking the bones of tragedy of these people and put his spin on it. And then that editorial became the story. And after that, he had some pretty rough times. He had problems with alcohol, like I said. And then I guess we'll start talking about this other parts of his life.
Yeah, In Cold Blood for him, he stumbled a little bit on. He had just got an assignment. He was about to write what it was like to be a maid for the day in Babe Paley's house in 1958. This is after the publication of Breakfast at Tiffany's. And it comes across, naturally, the article about the family in Kansas. I am going to vote he kind of was a real creep to Nell. So Harper Lee, Nell, his BFF since the age of 6, she had just put the finishing touches on To Kill a Mockingbird.
I've heard of it.
So that book is about to be published. So like Harper Lee's got some time, right? Yeah, Truman, I can go help you. Which she does. Her gentleness or femininity. I mean, because Truman, kind of funny looking. He's very tiny. He has a squeaky voice. He's kind of a flamboyant dresser. He's not immediately going to get in.
Openly gay, too, by the way. He never was in the closet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, never. But lending a little bit to, I guess, his creepiness factor, with the town feeling the way they did about Truman, he got in with the Deweys. Alvin Dewey, the head of the police. They were even invited via Truman to Dominic Dunn's Black and White Ball in April of 1964, which is the inspiration for Truman's Black and White Ball, held November 28th, 1966, upon the publication of In Cold Blood. Even though that's kind of tacky. He can't throw himself his own ball.
Right.
He says he gets it for Katharine Graham, the editor-publisher of the Washington Post. However, the party really is for Truman. He, I don't think, anticipated upon the idea of investigating that Kansas murder, knew that it was going to take 7 years, right? Between courts and appeals. There's part of me that thinks Truman really did get sort of folded over in his own brain through this. I mean, even from the age of 11, Truman is writing 4 hours a day. Even in the throes of his drug and alcohol misuse, Truman still writes every single day. That never leaves him. It is to your point after that, with the incredible success of In Cold Blood, right? Jealous Truman. He's a little mad that Harper Lee had it with her Pulitzer Prize winning To Kill a Mockingbird, but now here acclaim comes on to Truman upon the publication of In Cold Blood. This is 66. And now he's almost halted, stunted by the fame that he has experienced. He's got everything he's ever wanted and maybe feels like nothing's ever good enough again, which gets us to the publication of the nastiest thing that has ever been written in fiction, Lecoq Basque 1965, where he sells out all of his swans and causes just damage in his wake. For as fragile and complicated as his relationships have been, and I do, if I can, want to pull this through. A while ago, we talked about Truman, breaking through. Truman had already broken through. Truman went living with Nina and Joe Capote in this building with Carol Marcus. Carol Marcus is best friends with Una O'Neill, the daughter of Eugene O'Neill, and Gloria Vanderbilt.
And the wife of Charlie Chaplin, former creep.
Future wife of Charlie Chaplin. So Carol Marcus, Gloria Vanderbilt, and Una O'Neill are this trio. They have been a trio from a very long time. And even Gloria Vanderbilt's like, Carol, why are you kind of bringing Truman around? But Truman manifests these feminine relationships. Truman will get to know his first set of swans, which include Jennifer Jones, the second wife of David O. Selznick, and Marilyn Monroe in the early 1950s. It's incredible. Truman meets Babe Paley in 1954, and Truman's old set of swans phase out a little bit because now Truman has a new set. Babe Paley, CZ Guest, Slim Keith, Lee Radziwill, oh goodness, Gloria Guinness. Who else am I forgetting? Oh,
Sigourney Weaver's mom? Who's that?
Who?
Sigourney Weaver? Wasn't her mother one of the swans?
Not that I am aware of.
All right. Then
No. Let's see. Oh, Marella Agnelli. You can include probably Mona von Bismarck in that. You can include Katharine Graham in that. You can include probably Pamela Harriman Churchill. They all connect. It is just this web of interesting relationships, but Truman sells them all down the river in 75, continuing with his alcohol and drug misuse on a pretty intense scale, sort of wrecks the last decade of his life.
Right. It was published in Esquire magazine, right? It never became a full novel until posthumously, right?
Yeah, well, it was collected under Answered Prayers. And the Answered Prayers title, Truman uses from a quote from St. Cecilia about there have been more tears shed over unanswered prayers than answered ones. But it is Lee Radziwill, Jackie Bouvier Kennedy, Onassis's sister, that gives Truman an engraving that says, "You are my answered prayer." Her inspiration is what names that. It does end up getting released with 3 chapters. Goodness, Lecoq Basque 1965, which sells every one of his swans down the river in this Romana clay thing, but nobody's fooled. There's another chapter about Kate McLeod, who is Mona von Bismarck. Different pieces of this have come to light. There's an unearthed chapter recently, well, back in 2012, that was found called Yachts and Things about Kay Graham and how Katharine Graham from the Washington Post and Truman Capote in 1965 got messed up on the deck of the Agnelli's yacht on hashish.
Wow.
It's a wonderful story. Yeah. Anyway, Truman Capote is like such a complicated character.
Right.
Which is, after everything I've done and read, I've got my 28 books. Like, I've been obsessed with Truman Capote. And normally, right, Margot, you know how you feel with What a Creep.
Yeah.
Trashy divorces. I mean, there's a reason Trashy's in the name. Trashy Royals, same thing. Like, I know my brand of content. Like, let's talk about the trashy stuff. And for as many things as Truman did that were trashy, he did so many nice things too.
He's
He's
complicated.
complicated, really a complex guy. I do want to talk about one of those really nice things, which is what I think spurned me into this investigation. Dominic Dunn in the 60s and 70s lived in Hollywood. He was a Hollywood producer, married, kids, and he ends up, Dominic Dunn does, developing a pretty severe alcohol and drug problem as well. And Dominic Dunn decides that he needs to make some changes. He drops out of his life in 78, 79. He is staying in a cabin in Oregon. It has no phone. All Dominic has is a typewriter and a notepad. And he's been the guy who's been at a party every single night for his whole life. Here he is, remote cabin. Only his kids know how to get a hold of him. And one day, Margot, are you ready? It's just incredible. Truman Capote, this is 1979. Truman Capote is released, answered prayers. He's been on the skid since 75, at least with every friend, mostly that he's ever known.
Mm-hmm.
79. Here comes a letter to Dominic Dunn from Truman Capote in his own bottoming out. And Truman Capote has written Dominic because they've known each other for years. It is Stephen Sondheim who connects Dominic with Truman. I can't even tell you the spider webs. It's just incredible. Anyway, Truman sends this letter to Dominic Dunn like, hey, once you get out of what you need to get in that cabin in Oregon, you need to come back to your real life. And Dominic Dunn was always so touched by this, especially knowing what Truman was going through at the same time. He's such a complicated character. I think maybe with Truman Capote, to answer if he's a creep, you'd need to talk to an individual person at an individual moment in time about an individual situation, right?
Did he and Nell ever make up? Did they ever speak?
I wouldn't say made up per se. That whole period sort of burned him a little. And they were really very often different things, but it's not like Truman wasn't going down to Monroeville to visit his relatives.
Right.
Again, complicated relationships.
I mean, a remarkable human being. She was born in Monroeville, Alabama in 1926, Nellie Harper Lee. She was played by Catherine Keener and Sandra Bullock. They had dueling movies about Truman Capote, and the dueling Trumans were Philip Seymour Hoffman and then not Toby Keith. That would be hilarious, though. I would pay to see that. But but she helped him, with the research, with getting along with people, with introducing him to the right people in the right crowds, and to help him, ease people around him. She was a big part of that, and I don't think she ever really felt like he gave her the kind of appreciation that he should have. He really sort of dipped himself into this whole in cold blood world and took it for himself at the time. But she has the Pulitzer Prize. She is somebody who would go on to win a presidential award, Medal of Freedom award. She lived in actually New York City and in Alabama. And I have a creepy story for you. I had a creepy computer guy when I first started working from home. And this is like 2008, 2009. So it's not like Geek Squad would do like a connection with your computer at home. Like they would send people. And he was sent to me. And then I was constantly having issues. He's like, you know what? I'll just work off the clock for you. Why don't we do that? And then
nope.
Right.
Nope.
And one day we were just talking, and he started talking about his ex-wife and why they broke up. And he says, I think I could tell you this. She was not happy in the bedroom, so I promised her I would get a penile implant, but she didn't want to go for that. And I'm like, okay, this conversation is over. But the reason I bring him up is that he was also the computer guy for Harper Lee. And he didn't know who she was. And then one day he just brought a book over to her and she signed it for him. And then he said he went to a bookstore to show them, and they were like, we'll pay for it. We'll give you this much money. And he told her, and he said, no, this is mine. This is my friend. She gave it to me. And she's like, you're an idiot. You should have sold it. I'll sign another one for you. What do I care? So,
wow.
Yeah. It's New York is the smallest city in the world, I'm convinced. You could just run into just about anybody. Her last book was Go Set a Watchman, which I have friends that absolutely love that book, that think it's even better. I don't know how I feel about it. I like my Atticus Finch the way he was presented the first time, and she made him very different in this version. But that's our not creep this week, would be Nell Harper Lee.
I love it.
I love it too. Well, Alicia, thank you so much for this great talk today. I love that we mixed in some trashy divorces, contemporary, with the trashiness of Mr. Capote. Can you give everyone your call outs and your social media stuff, all that good stuff?
Most certainly. Thank you so much for having me. It really is a very, very, to your point, tiny, tiny, trashy world. If you want a little bit more listening, you can find Stacy and I on Trashy Royals. We drop every Sunday and every Wednesday. If you need a little Thursday listening, Trashy. Did I say Trashy Divorces or Royals there? I'm sorry, Margo.
You said Royals. No, it's fine. Just keep going.
Okay, hold on. Sorry. You can find Stacy and I at Trashy Divorces. We drop every Sunday and every Wednesday. If you're looking for a little Thursday listening, Trashy Royals is the place to go. We have wrapped up the Romanovs for now and are exploring the trashy Victorians. And again, done and done. That's Done and Dunne. If you want more on Dominic Dunne or Holy Cats, 14 episodes of Truman Capote and his swans, feel free to check that out. We drop on Mondays over there.
And where are you on social media?
The same, at Trashy Divorces, at Done and Done. No social media for Trashy Royals yet, but if you need to get a hold of us, trashydivorces@gmail.com is a great place to go.
Everybody, please, if you have suggestions for creeps, and especially non-creeps, that would be amazing. You could send us your suggestions with all those call-outs that I gave at the top of the show. We love it when you use the Andy Potts GIF. We got one, but you could just be clever and think of something on your own. Our basic old-timey email is whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com, and you could find me at Brooklyn Margo for TikTok and Twitter, and on the Threads, Instagram, and my site, it's Brooklyn Fit Chick. As we always say, stay safe, be good, don't be a creep.
Thanks again, Margo. I hope Sonia's having the best time. Y'all have a fantastic week. And again, don't be a creep.
Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.